The day the first alien spacecraft touched down on Earth, nobody was prepared for what followed. The Galactics, a race of highly intelligent extraterrestrial zoologists, landed in a quiet corner of the Amazon rainforest. The sleek, metallic ship hovered for a moment before descending slowly, its underbelly glowing with an eerie blue light. From the moment it landed, the world's attention was fixed upon it. Media outlets, military installations, and government agencies scrambled to respond, uncertain whether this was a peaceful encounter or an active invasion. The ship's hatch opened, and a group of 8 Galactics emerged. They were tall, humanoid beings, their skin a reflective silver blue, their eyes dark pools of swirling energy. Each wore a high-tech suit that seemed to pulse with faint patterns of light. The Galactics moved in a calm, methodical manner, their attention fixed on the life around them. In stark contrast to the humans' anxious curiosity, the aliens showed no signs of urgency, as though they had all the time in the galaxy. They weren't here for diplomacy, not exactly. They were here to study. Their first contact was serene, almost hypnotic. They did not speak at first. Instead, they deployed small drones into the rainforest, analyzing every aspect of the ecosystem, cataloging the flora and fauna with rapid efficiency. Earth's most elusive and dangerous species were not beyond their reach. The Galactics appeared particularly interested in the creatures that humans had long considered symbols of Earth's raw, untamed nature. The jaguars, the great white sharks, the venomous snakes, and curiously, the seemingly harmless insects that thrived in the underbrush. Every animal, from the tiniest ant to the most formidable apex predator, was cataloged and observed. For the first few weeks, the planet watched with mixed feelings. Some feared the Galactics were preparing for an invasion. Others believed this was just another scientific mission. Global leaders, however, were beginning to understand the depth of the Galactics' interest in Earth. The first unsettling hint came when the alien scientists transmitted their findings to the United Nations, revealing something that sent shivers down the spine of every leader on the planet. The Galactics had discovered something far beyond what they had expected. Earth's animals weren't just unique. They were perfectly designed for one thing: survival through combat. The Galactics observed how a single lion could bring down prey 10 times its size, how wolves hunted in perfect synchronization, and how even the smallest insect could overwhelm its target through sheer aggression. But it wasn't just about size or strength. It was about raw, unbridled violence that permeated every species. The aliens presented their findings as a revelation. Your planet, they stated, is home to a living armory. They spoke not of preservation or study, but of potential, how the creatures of Earth could be weaponized. They had witnessed firsthand what humans had only barely grasped. Earth's animals were more than just creatures of nature. They were evolutionary weapons, perfectly adapted for conflict. Humanity had just become aware that its own creatures, its fiercest, most primal beings, were now the target of a galactic zoological and military study. Earth's animals, once considered a natural treasure, were now seen through the lens of war. The stage was set, and the battle for Earth's animals had only just begun. The announcement from the Galactics sent shockwaves across Earth, reverberating through governments, scientific communities, and the general populace. The revelation that Earth's wildlife was viewed as living weapons by an advanced alien race was met with disbelief and fear. For centuries, humanity had seen its animals as part of the planet's natural beauty, a testament to the wonders of evolution. Now, in the eyes of the Galactics, they were valuable military assets, creatures honed by nature's ruthless hand for one purpose: combat. The Galactics had already begun their operations, methodically scanning the planet for the most dangerous creatures. Their lists included not just the apex predators, lions, tigers, and grizzly bears, but also less obvious candidates like the electric eel, the box jellyfish, and the incredibly deadly poison dart frog. Each of these animals possessed unique traits, from lethal toxins to unmatched speed, from extraordinary strength to an uncanny ability to survive extreme environments. The Galactics considered these traits not as marvels of nature, but as the building blocks of a galactic arsenal. Global governments quickly convened emergency meetings. The United Nations issued a statement calling for unity, but it was clear that the world was divided. Some leaders wanted to engage in peaceful negotiation with the Galactics, hoping to offer cooperation in exchange for leaving Earth's animals undisturbed. Others were less diplomatic. There were those who immediately called for a military response, fearing that if they allowed the Galactics to capture Earth's creatures, humanity would be next on the chopping block. Max Donovan, a former Special Forces operative turned wildlife protector, watched the events unfold from his remote cabin in Montana. He had worked with conservationists and zoologists for years, often traveling to the world's most dangerous places to study animal behavior and protect endangered species. The idea that these creatures would be treated as mere assets in an alien war machine horrified him. His instincts told him that if the Galactics were successful in capturing and weaponizing Earth's animals, it would only be a matter of time before they came for humanity. He wasn't alone in this belief. Rachel Carter, a brilliant biologist with a deep love for Earth's ecosystems, agreed. Rachel had worked on wildlife protection projects across the globe, but the situation was now far beyond anything she had ever dealt with. She realized that Earth's only hope lay in an unconventional alliance, one that combined the strength and survival instincts of Earth's creatures with the ingenuity of humanity. There was no room for traditional diplomacy or warfare. They would need to think like the animals if they were to survive this unprecedented threat. Rachel, Max, and Dr. Elias Weston, a former military strategist turned scientist, formed an unlikely team. Together, they began to draft a plan to fight back against the Galactics. Their first step: learn everything they could about the Galactics' technology and tactics. They needed to understand their enemy before they could outsmart them. Meanwhile, the Galactics moved forward with their plans, setting up research stations in remote locations across the world. In Africa, they began experimenting with tracking and capturing the continent's most dangerous predators. In the deep waters of the Pacific, they attempted to harness the venomous creatures that lurked beneath the waves. And in the frozen tundra of the Arctic, they took note of the polar bears, whose raw power and ferocity made them an ideal specimen for their collection. It was clear now, Earth's wildlife was under siege. The Galactics weren't here to study, they were here to conquer. And humanity's fight to protect its planet had only just begun. As the Galactics extended their reach across the globe, humanity was forced to react, not just through diplomacy, but through sheer determination. Earth's governments scrambled to form a united front, but the Galactics' superior technology left them with few options. The military was ill-prepared to face an alien force that could neutralize entire armies with a flick of a switch. The world's leaders, divided on the approach to take, knew one thing: they had to act fast or risk losing their most valuable resources, the creatures that called Earth home. Max Donovan, Rachel Carter, and Dr. Elias Weston quickly recognized that traditional military force wasn't the answer. The Galactics had proven too capable of neutralizing human combatants. What Earth needed was an unconventional defense, something that tapped into the very strength of its wildlife, their ferocity, their instinct, and their unparalleled ability to survive. The animals of Earth, though considered mere living weapons by the Galactics, could be Earth's greatest asset. But in order to protect them, humanity needed to rethink their entire strategy. Max reached out to a network of wildlife experts, conservationists, and ex-military personnel. They had to build a resistance, not just of humans, but one that included the animals themselves. The first challenge was organizing the animals. While many species could be trained to work with humans, they needed to leverage the natural instincts and battle readiness that many animals already possessed. Rachel, with her expertise in animal behavior, began working with various species, from apex predators to even less obvious candidates, like crows, dolphins, and elephants. She soon realized that animals could be trained to understand human commands, But more importantly, they could be taught to cooperate with one another. Wolves could work with dogs to form scouting and ambush units. Hawks could serve as aerial reconnaissance, while dolphins could detect underwater movements from enemy ships. The training wasn't easy, but the results were astonishing. Nature's most dangerous creatures had become part of a force that no one had ever imagined. Meanwhile, Dr. Weston used his knowledge of the Galrex's tactics to help develop technology that could enhance the animals' abilities. Working with a team of engineers and biologists, he created non-invasive devices that could amplify certain traits. For instance, they developed a collar for the elephants that would help them communicate over long distances with other animals. It didn't take long for humans to realize that Earth's animals, once simply part of the ecosystem, were now crucial to humanity's survival. Max took his training to the next level. He reached out to former military allies and recruited individuals who had experience in guerrilla warfare, survival tactics, and espionage. They would train alongside the animals, learning how to coordinate their movements, make strategic decisions, and fight using the planet's unique natural resources. Every member of the resistance was a vital piece in an increasingly complex web of defense. They were no longer just protecting their planet. They were preparing for a battle on a scale never seen before. As the resistance began to take shape, the first major operation was planned. An ambush of one of the Galrex's high-tech transport units in the African Savannah. It was time to show the aliens just how formidable Earth's wildlife could be when working in harmony with humanity. And for the first time since the Galrex landed, Max, Rachel, and Dr. Weston felt a flicker of hope that Earth's creatures, and the people who fought beside them, might just stand a chance. The first major operation was a calculated risk. The Galrex had been systematically capturing and studying Earth's most dangerous species for weeks, but the resistance had managed to pinpoint one of their key transport units traveling through the savannah. The unit was carrying dozens of animals, among them African lions and leopards that had been forcibly subdued and altered with Galrex technology. The creatures were to be studied and potentially weaponized, but the resistance had one goal: disrupt the Galrex's operation and show that Earth's wildlife was not theirs to control. Max Donovan and his team, including Rachel and Dr. Weston, had spent days scouting the area and planning every detail. The Galrex's transport unit was heavily guarded, and their advanced drones had already thwarted several small-scale operations in the past. The resistance would need more than just brute force to succeed. It would require perfect timing, absolute coordination, and the willingness to take risks that no one had considered before. The plan hinged on using the animals as the first strike. Max's team had been training a group of African elephants to work in tandem with the local buffalo herd. The elephants were to create a diversion, charging straight at the transport unit, creating enough chaos to disorient the Galrex soldiers. The buffalo, known for their immense strength and quick coordination, would then charge in from the opposite direction, flanking the unit and cutting off any retreat. As the operation unfolded, Rachel watched from the command post, her eyes glued to the monitor. The elephants moved with astonishing precision, trumpeting loudly and causing a dust storm that obscured the view of the Galrex troops. The transport unit's security forces scrambled, thinking they were under attack by a rogue herd, not realizing that the resistance was pulling the strings behind the scene. Meanwhile, Max led a small team on foot, using camouflage drones to monitor the movements of the Galrex soldiers. The lions, who had been freed from an earlier containment zone, had been trained to remain hidden in the tall grass until they were given the signal. Their natural instincts took over, and with deadly grace, they stalked toward the transport unit, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It was when the Galrex soldiers were fully distracted by the elephants that the lions launched their attack. The air filled with the sound of growling as the big cats pounced, overwhelming the remaining guards with their sheer speed and strength. The Galrex soldiers, who had no real experience with Earth's animals on this scale, panicked as the lions tore through their defenses, scattering them into the wilderness. Dr. Weston, watching the scene unfold on the surveillance feeds, spoke into his comms, giving the signal for the dolphins to begin their operation. Underwater surveillance drones, modified to detect Galrex movement, had been placed in nearby river systems. As the battle raged on, they launched a series of high-pitched sonic pulses, disabling the Galrex's external communication systems. By the time the Galrex understood the true scope of the Resistance's strategy, it was too late. The elephants had succeeded in isolating the transport unit, blocking off the escape routes, and the lions had neutralized the soldiers. Max's team, along with local wildlife experts, stormed the area and freed the animals, leading them back into the wild. The Galrex had underestimated Earth's creatures, failing to realize that, when united with humanity, they were a force of nature. In the aftermath, the Resistance had struck a significant blow against the Galrex. Not only had they freed dozens of animals, but they had proven that Earth's wildlife could no longer be captured and controlled. The fight was far from over, but the Galrex were beginning to learn that this battle would not be one they could win with force alone. Earth's creatures, working alongside humanity, were a force they had never encountered before. As Max watched the freed animals disappear into the distance, a rare smile broke across his face. This victory was only the beginning. The Galrex had provoked a sleeping giant, and now Earth was awake. The Galrex were not a race accustomed to defeat. The ambush in the African savannah was the first major failure they had experienced on Earth, and it left them reeling. For the first time since their arrival, they began to understand that Earth was not a planet easily subdued. The aliens had expected quick dominance over the planet's ecosystems, but what they had encountered was far more complex. A resistance that utilized Earth's animals not as mere obstacles, but as powerful allies. The damage from the ambush was far-reaching. Not only had dozens of their most prized specimens been freed, but several Galrex soldiers were injured or killed in the attack. In retaliation, the Galrex began to shift their strategy. No longer would they rely solely on their superior technology to overwhelm Earth's defenders. Now they would engage in a more calculated, ruthless pursuit of the creatures they had lost. Back at their research stations, the Galrex began to develop a new kind of weapon, one that combined their advanced technology with the very traits that had made Earth's animals so dangerous. They began experimenting with genetic manipulation, creating hybrid creatures that combined the raw power of Earth's predators with their own alien biotechnology. These genetic fusions were terrifying. They were faster, stronger, and far more aggressive than anything Earth had ever produced. A lion's strength with the endurance of a Galrex soldier. A crocodile's jaws merged with the toxin-producing abilities of the alien race. These were no longer simple animals. They were engineered monsters. Rachel Carter, who had been closely monitoring the situation, was the first to uncover the Galrex's new plan. She had been using her contacts in the field, who were still monitoring Galrex activities, to gather information. She had always suspected the aliens were working on something sinister, but the hybridization program was far worse than she could have imagined. The Galrex weren't just weaponizing animals, they were creating an entirely new breed of super predator. Max Donovan was equally concerned. The Resistance had grown stronger in the wake of their success, but they were still outmatched by the Galrex's technology. They had gained some traction by using Earth's natural advantages, but they knew that, without a proper counter to the hybrid creatures, they would soon be facing a more formidable enemy. "We need to hit them harder," Max told the team, his voice filled with urgency. "If they're creating these hybrids, we can't wait for them to come for us. We have to strike first." Dr. Weston agreed, but he understood that they needed to get a closer look at the Galrex's genetic labs before they could even begin to formulate a countermeasure. The Resistance had intel on a Galrex base in the Siberian tundra, where they were believed to be conducting their most dangerous experiments. The decision was made. A small elite team, led by Max and Rachel, would infiltrate the base and gather information on the hybrids. The risks were high, but it was their only chance. They would need to outsmart the Galactics once again, using their knowledge of the terrain and the instincts of Earth's animals to stay one step ahead. As the team prepared for the mission, tensions were high. The stakes had escalated beyond a fight for survival. Now, it was about outwitting an enemy that had begun to bend the very laws of nature to its will. For the first time, the Resistance understood that the future of Earth was not just about saving its creatures. It was about taking the fight directly to the heart of the Galactic operations. The mission to the Siberian base would be their most dangerous operation yet, but it was the only hope they had left to keep the Galactics from completing their twisted vision of a hybrid army. The Siberian tundra was an unforgiving place, a landscape of endless snow and icy winds. For Max Donovan and his team, it was a stark contrast to the lush savannas and dense jungles they had fought in before. This was not a terrain that favored the human body. The freezing temperatures alone could cripple an unprepared soldier. But it was a necessary risk. The Galactic base, hidden deep in the wilderness, was where they had been creating their monstrous hybrids, half Earth's deadliest predators, half Galactic's technology. If the Resistance was to stop them, they had to infiltrate the base and gather intelligence before the Galactics could unleash their creations on the planet. Max, Rachel Carter, and Dr. Elias Weston, along with a small team of elite operatives, had undergone weeks of preparation. The terrain was hostile, but the animals they had trained to assist them, polar bears, wolves, and snow leopards, would help provide an edge in this frozen wilderness. The animals' instincts and physical prowess, combined with the team's tactical skills, were their only advantage against the Galactic's technological might. The team moved stealthily through the snow, their footprints disappearing almost immediately under the relentless wind. The sound of the snow crunching beneath their boots was the only noise breaking the eerie silence of the tundra. They were close to the base now, just beyond the horizon. An industrial complex loomed, surrounded by high walls of steel and guarded by Galactic soldiers patrolling the perimeter. The cold made everything harder. Their breath hung in the air like smoke, and the team had to fight to keep their fingers from freezing, but they had no time to waste. Max scanned the area through binoculars, his breath fogging up the lens. The Galactics were clearly well prepared, with advanced surveillance systems covering every inch of the compound. But there was one glaring weakness. The perimeter was not as tight as they had expected. A gap in the security coverage, likely caused by the environmental conditions, left a section of the wall less monitored than others. "That's our window," Max said quietly, his voice low as he signaled for the team to gather. "We move fast and quiet. No mistakes." Rachel and Dr. Weston nodded. The animals, 2 massive polar bears, a pack of wolves, and 2 snow leopards, moved with the team, their white coats blending with the snow as they advanced. The animals were invaluable in this environment, using their superior senses to detect any movement or hidden threats the team might have missed. They reached the gap in the security perimeter without incident. The team crept through, utilizing the cover of the night and the blizzard that had begun to pick up. Inside the base, the walls were thick with soundproofing, but the team could feel the hum of advanced equipment beneath their boots. They moved toward the central research building, where they suspected the hybrids were being created. The team split into 2 groups, one to infiltrate the building and gather data on the hybrid experiments, and the other to disable the security systems. The animals, trained to work with humans, remained on alert, ready to act at a moment's notice. The polar bears were positioned near the outer edges, watching for any guards that might approach, while the wolves and snow leopards took positions closer to the building, ready to strike if necessary. Inside the facility, the team found a lab filled with tanks, each containing a horrifying blend of Earth's predators and Galactic's technology. The hybrids were being grown and studied in containment chambers, their bodies a grotesque combination of muscle, alien machinery, and raw aggression. The sight was enough to freeze Rachel's blood, but there was no time for shock. She and Dr. Weston quickly began transferring data from the lab's computers, recording every detail they could find about the Galrex experiments. Max, meanwhile, had found something far worse: an entire section of the base dedicated to weaponizing these hybrids for galactic conquest. The hybrids were not just experiments. They were soldiers in the making, and they were far more advanced than anything the Resistance had anticipated. "We need to get out of here now," Max whispered urgently into his comms. They had what they came for, but the mission was far from over. The Galrex were beginning to realize that their precious base had been compromised. Outside, the wolves howled, signaling that the perimeter was about to be breached. The escape would be even harder than the infiltration, and they would have to fight their way through. The cold tundra had just become their battleground, and Earth's animals, working with humanity, were about to face their deadliest enemy yet. The blizzard intensified as the team made their way toward the exit, but it was no longer just the weather that slowed them down. The Galrex had been alerted. The unmistakable sound of boots crunching on the snow echoed through the compound, followed by the eerie hum of alien tech coming to life. Their time was running out. Max signaled for the team to speed up, but the blizzard was now so thick that visibility was nearly zero. They relied on their trained animals, polar bears and wolves, who led the way, their keen senses able to cut through the chaos of snow and wind. The snow leopards, fast and silent, flanked the team, making sure no Galrex soldiers crept up behind them. As they reached the outer perimeter of the compound, the first wave of Galrex soldiers appeared through the storm, their dark figures looming against the swirling white. Max's heart raced. He knew they had to make it past these soldiers if they were to escape with the vital data they'd stolen. But they weren't just up against armed troops. Behind them, in the shadows, came the terrifying hybrid creatures, the products of the Galrex's twisted experiments. The first hybrid emerged, a creature that was part wolf, part alien, with glowing red eyes and razor-sharp claws. It growled low in its throat, a sound that made the snow beneath the team tremble. Then more followed, hybrids that combined the viciousness of Earth's predators with the unnatural strength of Galrex bioengineering. "Ready yourselves," Max barked as he pulled out his rifle, not for offense, but for cover. The team spread out, setting up defensive positions. The polar bears moved forward, roaring in challenge, and the wolves began to circle, anticipating the attack. But the hybrids were unlike anything they had encountered before. They moved with unnatural speed and precision, their instincts enhanced by the alien tech grafted into their bodies. Rachel and Dr. Weston watched as the hybrids pounced, their limbs extended in impossible ways. The snow leopards were the first to engage, darting between the hybrids, striking with lethal force. But it was clear that the Galrex's creations were stronger, faster, and more vicious. One of the snow leopards was knocked aside by a hybrid's tail, like a blade, sending it crashing into the snow. The battle was no longer about strategy. It was about survival. Max, unwilling to leave any of his team behind, shouted over the noise of the fight, "Fall back. We need to get to the ridge now." The team began retreating toward the rocky outcrop that marked the boundary of the compound. The polar bears fought ferociously, charging the hybrids with their raw strength, but it was becoming clear that the Galrex's hybrids were too much. The wolves, agile and swift, leaped in to protect the retreat, drawing the hybrids' attention away from the humans. Max and Rachel used every second of their training to stay ahead of the beasts, knowing that once the Galrex sent reinforcements, they would be completely surrounded. Dr. Weston managed to deploy a small EMP device, hoping to disable the Galrex's surveillance drones that were closing in on their position. The pulse of energy knocked out a few of the drones, causing a temporary breach in their air surveillance, but the victory was short-lived. The hybrids were relentless. Just when it seemed they would be overwhelmed, an unexpected sound cut through the chaos, the growl of something larger than the hybrids. From the storm emerged a massive creature, a fully grown polar bear, its fur matted with blood, but its eyes burning with an undying will to protect. It was the leader of the pack that had been trained by the Resistance, and it was ready to fight. The giant bear charged the nearest hybrid, its claws raking through the air with terrifying precision. The hybrids, stunned by the force of the attack, hesitated for just a moment, long enough for the team to break free. Max grabbed Rachel's arm, pulling her toward the ridge as the polar bear and the wolves held the line, buying them precious moments. With the hybrids at their heels, the team reached the ridge, where an extraction team, waiting in a specially outfitted snowmobile, was ready to take them back to safety. Max pushed Rachel into the vehicle, urging Dr. Weston to follow. As the engines roared to life, the team made their escape, but the battle wasn't over. The Galactics would not let them go easily. The mission was a success. Data was secured, and they had a better understanding of the hybrid threat. But at what cost? As they sped through the snowstorm, Max glanced back at the compound. The polar bears and wolves were still fighting, still holding their ground against the nightmare the Galactics had created. And though their mission had been successful, it was clear that the war had only just begun. The sound of the snowmobile's engine roared through the howling blizzard as Max, Rachel, and Dr. Weston huddled together, the cold biting through their gear. They had escaped the Galactic base, but it had been a narrow victory. The data they had secured was invaluable. The hybridization program was far more advanced than anyone had expected. The Galactics were creating a biological army that could threaten not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Yet, despite the harrowing escape, there was something in the pit of Max's stomach that gnawed at him. The team had seen the hybrid's sheer power firsthand, and they knew they had only just scratched the surface of the Galactic's capabilities. This wasn't just a fight for Earth's survival. It was a battle to stop a genocidal empire from wiping out the very concept of natural life. Back at the underground resistance base, Max and his team debriefed. The data had been transferred to a secure server, and the first thing they learned was that the Galactics had already begun to deploy their new hybrid soldiers across key locations worldwide. The hybrids weren't just a contingency, they were a first wave in a broader campaign. Entire ecosystems were at risk, not just on Earth, but in other galaxies the Galactics sought to conquer. Rachel looked at the data, her brow furrowed. We have to find a way to stop the hybrids before they get deployed in full force. If we wait too long, Earth won't be the only planet they destroy. Dr. Weston, his mind racing through the genetic data they had gathered, nodded gravely. It's worse than we thought. These hybrids are biologically engineered to adapt to any environment. The Galactics have perfected a method to integrate Earth's biology with their own. It's almost symbiotic. Max's gaze hardened. We don't have the luxury of waiting. The Galactics are already regrouping, and if they manage to launch their hybrid army in full, we'll be fighting a war we can't win. We need to take the fight to them before they finish their experiments. The plan to counter the hybrid army began to take shape quickly. The Resistance's best minds, both human and animal experts, came together to devise a strategy. The key was to disrupt the Galactic's genetic research and destroy the infrastructure that supported their hybrid program. The team would need to locate the heart of the Galactic's operations, an advanced bioengineering facility that was rumored to be located on a remote asteroid in their home system. But the operation would be a suicide mission. The Galactics would be waiting, prepared to defend their new weapons with everything they had. Even with the help of Earth's animals, even with their combined intelligence, they knew the odds of success were slim. Still, they had no other choice. As Max and his team prepared for the final assault, the animals who had fought alongside them, polar bears, wolves, lions, and even the dolphins, stood ready for one last stand. They had become more than just allies in this fight. They had become partners. Together, humanity and Earth's wildlife were a force unlike anything the Galactics had encountered. The countdown began. Max, Rachel, and Dr. Weston exchanged determined glances. This was the last chance they had to stop the Galactics and save their world. The battle for Earth's future was about to reach its boiling point, and the animals of Earth, the living weapons the Galactics had so underestimated, were about to show the invaders what it meant to face the full fury of a planet that would not be conquered. The time for waiting was over. The resistance would hit the Galactics where it hurt the most, on their home turf, and take the war to their doorstep. This was their last chance. This was humanity's final stand.